Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Mission Yozakura Family, Season 1, Episode 25. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Picking up where the last episode left off, Kishiro and Taiyo are going to confront Kawashita, but they can't. Kawashita's basically a living dead man switch. If he suffers any injuries or dies, it sets off the explosions on the island and sets their seed sowing project in motion. For him, it's like, right, if I die, who cares? I will die knowing that my cause was just, and I was able to see this through regardless. And Kawashita can be so evil because he's taunting Taiyo. It's like, cool, you can attack me right now and potentially set this off, or you could sit back and watch as your little brother Nano, because he's fighting Mizuki and I. And it's like, right, kind of the perfect opponent considering Mizuki's whole thing is releasing poison. So we find out about his backstory because Nano's like, right, with all that I've been able to research, I can remove the Hasakura from your bodies and you'll be able to reintegrate you into society. But for him, it's like, no, I don't want to be a part of society because there was a chemical plant near where he lived and a whole bunch of people got sick because it poisoned the soil, took them to court, but they came out on top. In fact, the narrative did switch to them as making it seem like they were like people with an agenda trying to take down this company. It's like, right, you were David going up against Goliath. You were going up against a conglomerate, and they were never going to win. But now it ended up being like even worse off. And we see like he lost his wife and his daughter. And when he was at his lowest, when he was just ready to accept death and stuff, that's when Kawashita came to him in his frail and disintegrating body. Kawashita kind of gave him new purpose. So. And I talks about it a little bit too, like, yes, she doesn't always like Kawashita. He can be scary, and there's sad stuff associated with this place, but this place is the only home she's really known because we find out Ai comes from an abusive family. In fact, Mizuki killed her abusive mom, but it's like, her mom was like, we saw it like, her grabbing her hair, had a broken bottle in her hand, and then like we saw the state I was in, like his cuts all over her body. Her mom was a piece of work, and so for her, that's why this place means so much. It's like, yes, it's sad, it effed up what happens here, but it's the only home I want, and so she's fighting to protect it because, you know, this is all she knows. This is the only home, the only place she's ever felt good. Like I said, there's sad stuff that's come along with it because there was even that flashback where I was talking to a kid, and one of the kids beside her, it's like how she was like, yeah, he has a low compatibility with the Hasakura, so he's going to be sacrificed, but I seems to be pretty good, so for a while, we'll keep it around a little while longer. And then we find out Mizuki, the reason why it seemed like he could be a bit of a dick, because he's very like nice with Ai before, but then we saw that darker side of himself when it came to him with Ai, and like him grabbing her head and kind of got a little scary. Well, we now find out he did that for her sake because he knows like Kawashita will kill anyone without any hesitation, and her whining and complaining about the circumstances. He's like, I don't want. He's like to save her from potentially Kawashita's wrath. He'd rather scare her, and he apologized for that later. But he's like, I didn't mean to do that because he's like, I know. Because now you also add in context of why he knows why that worked on her the way it did. He's like, I apologize. He's like grabbing her hair. And at the time, it's only now saying it now that I realized what he was saying. Because her mom would constantly do it. We even saw in the flashback, her mom would grab her hair like to hold her down to hurt her. So that's why like him doing that like made her shake. Because she has trauma associated with someone touching her head like that. So it's really heartbreaking, but it's like knowing like, oh, he's not a bad guy. Like, there's a lot of people, once again, the series is most likely going to make Kawashita someone that you can be sympathetic towards, but everyone else here is someone that is, you know, should be sympathetic toward every one of this group. I mean, except for like, what's it, Kurosawa? Or was it I forgot, home dude that Shinzo fought. I think it might have been Kurosawa. He's the only one we really don't know his backstory, but the other members, was it Nijibana? like we've gotten their backstories, and they've all had tragic backstories, you know. So, but we also, but luckily, they're not in this fight alone because was it Seiji, Rin, Oga, and Sweet all show up. Different people from the spy organization, and like they're all here helping out. And so I was just thinking about it. I was like, man, I know like they were going to show up, but I'm like, we're not going to see Ren go all out or anything like that. Because we haven't really seen them really all fully cut loose. I was like, oh, I guess we're not going to get that. Because this is the Yozakura's fight. So it feels important that they're the ones to settle this. So Ren and them aren't going to get mixed up in. I mean, I doubt this is the end of Tanpopo. It might be, but it feels like there's still more to Tanpopo than this. So they will always have their chance later on, but this is like the Yozakura's fight right now. But we'll see how things kind of play out ultimately. But either way, Nano ends up activating his blooming, and his blooming is adaptation. You know, it's like it's very befitting of his body because he adapts to any circumstances. He creates antitoxins for any poison and stuff like that. You know, he creates these little like spores that are filled like with like semen, and that can purify any poison, and it purifies poison at a faster rate than Mizuki can pump it out. And I love what Nano says, where he's just kind of like, this place isn't a great place, because he's like, I've looked into the files of everyone that's kind of been, because of the files I got from like Shirai, what he's learned from all these different files and stuff about like Hazakura and its test subjects and stuff. And he says that basically you were victims of Kawashita, that like, yeah, he might not be directly involved with said circumstances that he found you in, but he manipulated the situation and took advantage of the situation to make you dependent on him. Because for Nano, it's like he robbed you of the opportunity to adapt to your circumstances. It's like life can suck, but it is about surviving by adapting. And we as humans, we adapt to situations. We can be, you know, it's not always the easiest thing, but he robbed you of that opportunity. It's almost like he robbed you of your choice of living your life a certain way. And it's like, at the end of the day, this is all about control for Kawashita. What is it beyond that? It's nothing else but control. And he's like, he robbed you of your opportunity to adapt, because adapting isn't something that's given to someone. It's something that every single person is capable of adapting, and that ability was robbed of you by Kawashita just for the purpose of being able to control you. But sadly, well, he was able to stop Mizuki, but circumstances kick in where it's like, it's too much for her, like her fight, and just like using her Hazakura, like it. Cause I guess she's probably never activated her kind of like her pseudo blooming. She's probably never activated it, at least for long periods of time, and it was just too much for her. And so Nano's attempt to recover her, save her, and purify like her didn't work. And Mizuki says that basically there's so little, the amount of Hazakura in her system is so small, so he adds more of his parasomnin into her veins to kind of, because there's so little Hazakura in her body, his attempts to heal her are just kind of making things worse. But it's like, if you pump her full of parasomnin and kind of balance out that, adding more Hazakura essentially to her, you're balancing it out so that what Nano is doing actually works. And Mizuki ends up sacrificing himself in the process, because for him, it's like all he wanted to do was protect the girl, because from the very beginning, I reminded him of his dead daughter. And he's like, right, like I wanted to try and protect her, and you Hazakura is like, promise me you'll like kind of bring her back into the light, you know, instead of this dark road that we're down. So it's kind of sad, because up until this point, they've been able to manage to keep every like Nijibano member they've gone up against, been able to kind of incapacitate them. But you know, I mean, even this, it was not like Nano killed him. It's like, no, he sacrificed himself, which we cut back to Kawashita, who is not too happy about this situation. Well, he acts indifferent, but he calls Mizuki an idiot for like acting like this over one single life. But I think there's irony behind that. I think that's him overcompensating, but I'll get to that in a second. But Taiyo ends up attacking him, but Kawashita seems to be fine. And then Kishiro slices his head and his arm off, but then we find out he regenerates. Turns out he's over 100 years old because he was born in 1914. So you're like, wait, how is that possible? And then he activates his blooming. It's not like the same pattern as the Hasakura. It's the Yozakura flower blooming pattern in his eyes. And you're like, how did he do that? And he says that basically back during World War II, he became aware of the Yosakuras because the military was aware of them. And it's like, right, they wanted to have soldiers on the battlefield. It's your typical super soldier program situation of like, oh yeah, like Captain America and stuff like that. You want super soldiers on the front lines and stuff like that. But all the research that Kawashita did kind of amounted to nothing, because they all, obviously it's Japan, so they ended up losing the war, so that kind of put a kibosh in that. But one interesting thing that like Kishiro kind of points out, what he thinks is interesting, it's like, the fact of the matter is, he's like, you would have been doing that in like 1945, trying to get the government's talking about the Yosakuras, but the Yosakuras were not working with the government at that time. The Yosakuras stopped working with the government in like 1895. So how would you have been able to do your research? And he kind of flashes to like, we see a Yosakura ring on someone's hand, and he kind of changes the subject afterwards. I was like, you're like, he's an outsider to the Yosakura family, like Bon, Momo, and Taiyo. I think he had a very similar circumstance. I think a previous head of the Yosakura family got close to him, and it might have been a thing of, oh, I'm going to use you for my research, so I got close to you, but then he actually fell in love with them and then lost them for whatever reason. Because we did once again see that photo of like, oh, there's some people around him that he cares about. That's probably not like his legitimate family. That might be the family he gained by being close to the Yosakuras. Like, he might have been about to marry into a Yosakura family like Taiyo and them, but maybe he never had the opportunity to. I mean, well, it's like once you put the ring on, you're practically married, even though there's no like ceremony and stuff. That is, it's not like, oh, we're engaged. It's like, no, we're married. I gotta always remember that. So he might have been married into the. I think that's going to be that's going to be what the reveal might be, especially because like the next episode is called Old Blood. It's like, well, there could be layers to that, because he might be having like, because that would explain why he has the Yosakura eyes, and it's not Hazakura blooming. It's an actual Yosakura blooming. It's probably because he's in the exact same situation as them, as that he's an outsider that got the Yosakura blood. Like I said, I think his backstory is going to be he got close to a Yosakura for research purposes, but fell in love with her. I think that's what we're going to get, but we'll see. But it feels like that might be what his backstory ends up being. And because it seems for him, he talks about how society's not fair and life's not fair. Like, that's why he's almost like, I'm building a world that's going to be based on equality. It's like, right, the Yosakuras, why should they be the only ones? Because the blood of the Yosakuras and that power could bring the balances of the world, because like, power, economic stuff like money and all that controls so much power, but the Yosakuras could bring balance. So it's like, I'm going to spread that to the world. It's like, yeah, some people have to die in the process, but at least it's almost on some Thanos level stuff of bringing balance to the world, because he saw the imbalances. I don't know if that's a byproduct of his upbringing, that he saw that side of things. And maybe that's also why he toys with Taiyo a little bit about the whole, like, oh, hearing Nano dying, like, oh, you want to hear Nano die through this intercom, because it's like, yeah, like, are you going to have to sit there and listen to the final breaths of another family member, like, kind of referencing his own family. But once again, I wonder if Kawashita's spewing all this because, as I was kind of talking about before, like, that he is in his situation. He's a lot like Taiyo, and it's kind of the thing of, Taiyo had gotten this previously with oh god, what was home dude's name? Was it Kuroyuri? Was that his name? I can't remember now. But it's like, yeah, like, that's who Taiyo could have been, years down his path of seeking revenge. And then I think Taiyo might learn that Kawashita is who he could have been or who he can be if he ends up losing Mitsumi or something like that. So I feel like that's the stage they're setting up. But we'll ultimately have to wait to see. The episode ends with him utilizing his blooming, and basically his power is regeneration. We haven't really properly found out what, and I guess we will, well, we're probably going to find out next episode what Kishiro's blooming actually is. But also, like, we don't fully know what, I don't think it's been fully defined what Taiyo's blooming really is either. So, and I'm sure he's going to discover that maybe in his fight with Kawashita or potentially his fight with Momo, depending on how that all plays out. If it comes down to that, which I feel like it will. But either way, because of his regenerative ability, basically every one of his test subjects exists in his DNA. So that's also probably why he's fine with giving up his test subjects, because all the research and all all that information will be gone, but their DNA will exist to some extent inside of his blood. But it probably isn't as helpful, but it still proves useful in the long run. Either way, he creates a monstrosity born from that. Kind of, I don't know, I was about to make other references. I'm like, I've made enough Trails references for a lifetime because I constantly reference it. But I was like, yeah, I was going to make some like Ishmael Go reference of like how it kind of reminded me of that. But either way. But yeah, I love like Kishiro using the puppeteering ability on puppeteering Taiyo, and then it's like, right, made the thing attack, so all its densities in one particular place, so its rest of its body's kind of vulnerable enough that he could spring Taiyo back and fling him like a hardened bullet, and sends Taiyo after Kawashita while he stands behind. And that might be the situation where Kishiro decides to he's going to use his blooming to get rid of this thing while Taiyo goes and faces up against Kawashita. So only 2 episodes left in the season. It's going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us, ultimately going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.